woman's face being demented and a howling mask. So anyway, Hugh Hewitt, let's talk about Carly Fiorina for a second. She does always seem to overperform. I think should make a hell of a lawyer. I would love her on my side in whatever argument there was. But we've been talking about media bias an awful lot, and a lot of Republican candidates try to hide behind media bias, but as I've said very clearly, it exists, and it's pretty strong out there.
Hey, Joe, it's good to talk to you. I was feeling like Ray at a Republican debate there for a little bit out here in Santa Fe. Two things. Back to the Rubio story. There is no story. He was not deceptive in that. There is nothing wrong with that. It's a complete and utter. I mean, that story is better than Charlie Crist's political career. That is not a story. But as for Carly Fiorina, she did earnings calls for public companies for many years, 6, 7 years. That means 4 times a year. She sat down with financial journalists and took all sorts of questions. She is the most practiced answerer of difficult questions. And I thought it was vulgar. I thought it was disgusting what The View did. And I worked with a female co-host in D.C. in L.A. on PBS for 10 years. And she repeatedly, every single show, got comments on her appearance. Men never get that. And so I can understand people stepping in it if they're a guy, but I do not understand The View. And Joy Behar, her explanation was so over the top. Defensive. I think it showed that she was protesting too much. They were guilty of the worst sort of attack on a person for their appearance when they're a woman.
All right, moving on now. Ben Carson spent much of the weekend beating back the scrutiny of being one of the front runners in the Republican
fundamental problem with the truth, but some of the examples, I think, are not fair to him to lump in with all the others.
I think they look like stories, Willie, that kind of paint a picture of him of being this sort of godlike savior of all people. Go ahead.
A little self-aggrandizing, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, sort of like the guy that would have Jesus hanging with him in a terry cloth robe.
That's a bold move. I'll give you that.
No, I'll give you that. They're all kind of.
That is a bold move.
I was there and changed the world and saved lives.
Your question, Mika, about the Westmoreland dinner. So he says in the book it was Memorial Day 1969 in Detroit. Westmoreland was not in Detroit.
That's pretty specific.
There was a banquet in February of 1969, and Carson's campaign has now come out and said, we believe it was at that banquet
that they talked.
That Ben Carson met Westmoreland. They talked about him being in the ROTC and then perhaps going on to West Point. Hugh Hewitt, I heard you a little bit on Meet the Press yesterday. What do you think all these stories for Ben Carson amount to? Hugh?
I went over and saw Armstrong Williams on Saturday, spent some time talking to the campaign. He's not a campaign guy. He's the business manager of Barack Obama. They're not worried by this at all, and they do not believe that their base of support will be troubled. And I think they're probably right. Usually voters react negatively when there's a contemporaneous untruth. Al Gore had a problem in 2000 because all of his untruths were very close to the period of time in which he was running for president. Last week in the Washington Free Beacon, Lachlan Marquet had a piece on former Secretary of State Clinton's NDA, or non-disclosure agreement. Last week, there was a piece by Reuters on the Teneo Group's relationships with the Department of State. There appear to be lies in Mrs. Clinton's immediate past. Those will be problematic. But if you go back 30 or 40 years, unless you can find and by the way, Joe, we could prove you were not on the moon. That's not proving a negative.
No, you can't, because I was.
I'm just shelter some kids in high school.
You can't prove that I wasn't on the moon, and also that I wasn't told that.
You can't.
Yeah, you know what I actually did, though? I did have somebody come up and tell me, Joe, we want you to be an astronaut. But I chose instead to go to the University of Alabama and sit in the back and read Sports Illustrated. You can't prove that I didn't do that.
We couldn't disprove that.
No,
we could not disprove that. We could not disprove that.
Exactly. So, Hugh, I guess my problem is
it's a negative.
I want to win. I like winning. I like winning, and I'm going to talk as a Republican here. I don't want to lose another presidential election. We've lost 5 out of the last 6 in the popular vote. And it seems like every 4 years we put up people like Herman Cain, Michelle Bachmann, and others. And all the conservative media pretends that these people have a chance to win. And every 4 years, I say they will never win. They will never be president. They are not qualified to be president. They do not know the issues well enough to be president. And I get skewered every 4 years. And it's sort of a lonely position that I'm in, Hugh. But you know what? You know me. A guy that's walked on the moon, I can take it. I'm strong. But at this point, Ben Carson, these stories do not add up. The conservative media knows these stories do not add up. How long do we sit back quietly and pretend that they do add up because we don't want to offend our audience?
I don't think that's what's going on here at all. We do not want to encourage the media to destroy Republicans and protect Democrats. We do not want to engage in the knifing of our candidates and ignore over here an NDA that Lachlan finds in a Teneo set of questions that haven't been answered. 18 U.S.C. 1924, which Mrs. Clinton almost certainly violated. We don't want to be part of that gang.
My God, Hugh.
That's not what we just do not want to be part of that gang.
We have sat around this table with me at the lead and Mika with me as well every day for 6 months, digging in as deeply as we can on Hillary Clinton's finances, on Hillary Clinton's foundation, on Hillary Clinton's emails, day in and day out. Why can we not look for...
Have you covered the Teneo letter?
No, I haven't, Hugh. That happened last week. But I know you've got a talking point of these 2 little things that happened last week. What I'm saying is you put it into perspective, and if your only argument, Hugh, if your only argument is that the media is covering Ben Carson for a day and a half, but they haven't covered Hillary Clinton's problems long enough, that's not a very strong argument, especially around this table where Hillary Clinton has been pilloried for 6 months now.
It's an incredibly strong argument with the Republican base. It's an incredibly strong argument.
That doesn't make it correct.
You're just proving my point. You're just proving my point. If you're interested in impressing the Republican base and not winning the presidency, then keep that up.
Yep.
But this is about actually finding out who the strongest Republican candidate is that can actually win in the fall.
You're so wrong. The Hindenburg debate of 2 weeks ago helped the Republican Party generally by exposing to the United States completely, both Democrat, Republican, and Independent, that Republicans face a headwind, Democrats have the wind at their back. Now, that is something that's very useful for people to remember. And it's very useful for me to come on a show like this and say, hey, folks, look, over here, there are 2 major Hillary stories which no one's covering while we're trying to find Ben Carson's friend from 40 years ago. Eventually, it adds up into a narrative. David Marin has proved this when he wrote his biography of Barack Obama. You folks in the Manhattan, D.C., Beltway,
no. Hugh, you're so full of it. You know better than that, Hugh. And you need to go back and see what I said a week ago about media bias. I put my neck on the line every single day here, and I say things here. You Manhattan people, Hugh, please don't embarrass yourself because you're talking about me, a guy who's gone after Republicans and Democrats and media bias. You owe me an apology on the air right now because you know better than to say that about me.
Joe, I absolutely do not. The Manhattan, I didn't say that. I said about the Manhattan Beltway media elite. I love you, Joe. I know you walked on the moon. But the problem is that the mainstream media will not cover Hillary's problems.
Oh, my God.
Okay, let me take it from
here. The mainstream media will not cover Hillary's problems. That's amazing.
Hugh, I'd like for you to watch this interview and watch yourself. You might want to come back. You might.